all that meat and no potatoes just ain't right. Like green tomatoes. Do you know that song?
No.
Oh, it's a Louis Armstrong classic. All that meat and no potatoes just ain't right. Like green tomatoes.
We're speaking about meat today. Everything from pork chops and meatballs to salami and chorizo. Join us to learn all about butcher's vocabulary in English on this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Welcome, I'm Craig.
And I'm Reza.
And together with over 45 years of teaching English, I can't say the word, English between us, we'll help you improve it and take your grammar, your vocabulary, your phrasal verbs, your idioms and everything to the next level. Yes, you can watch YouTube videos that are 10 years old to try and improve your English, but why not stay with us? And every week we'll teach you something new. Hi, Reza.
How's it going, Craig?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm in a wonderful mood today. How are you?
Me too. I'm ready to go. Shall we get cracking with the first voice message?
Yes, let's listen to our first piece of feedback from Gabriel from Mexico.
Hello, Russ and Craig. This is Gabriel from Mexico. First of all, I want to say thank you for your amazing work. I think Mansión Inglés is one of the best podcasts if you want to learn English or just to spend a great time. I've been listening to you for a while, maybe 3 or 4 months, and I feel that my level of English has improved. So thank you for that. Now, I've got a question for you guys. What's the difference between have got and got? Lately, I notice some people using only got when they talk about something they have. And that's a little bit confusing for me. It will be great if you can explain it, and if it's possible, give us some examples. That's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the holidays, and see you later.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, and happy holidays to you too over there in Mexico. Hope you have a wonderful new year. Reza, any comments?
Yes, first of all, what a clear message. Excellent, excellent. And particularly good pronunciation and use of intonation. His intonation was very good to add meaning, wasn't it?
He spoke very well, very clearly, understood everything, no problem. So well done, Gabriel, and your pronunciation. What about his question of have got and got?
I'll get to that in a minute. I just have to be a little bit picky, un poco tiquis-mickeys. You did make one tiny mistake. You said, spend a great time. It's have a great time. Which isn't really logical, Gabriel, because we do say spend time in English. Spend time, spend money. But if you say specifically a great time, or a good time, or a bad time, it's have a good time,
and
have a great time.
Yeah, you'd also say have a wonderful holiday, have a lovely Christmas, have a wonderful New Year as well.
So, his question, Craig, have got and got. I think I know what he means. He's saying that some people sometimes say things like this. I got an idea, which technically isn't correct English.
Did you say I got or I've got?
I got.
I got.
I got an idea.
That sounds very American to me.
Yep. But really, it isn't correct, is it? I got an idea. That isn't what they mean to say. They mean to say, I've got an idea.
Well, if they're British, yes. But for possession, for having something, Americans are more likely to say, I have. For example, I have an idea, I have a car, I have a dog, I have a job. Whereas British English speakers are more likely to say, I have got, but with the contraction. So you contract I have to I've. So I've got a car, I've got a job, I've got an idea, etc.
Yeah. But sometimes you hear people say just I got.
Yeah.
And they don't use the have as kind of slang. I got an idea, but it's not really correct. Another thing is got coming from get.
Right, as a past or third form.
Right.
Exactly.
So the verb to get, G-E-T, the past simple is got. And then the past participle depends if you're British, it's got. And if you're American, it's gotten. So, for example, I could ask you, have you ever got drunk in public? ¿Te has emborrachado alguna vez en público? Have you ever got drunk? Because the expression is to get drunk. So, the past participle, have you ever got drunk? Or in American English, have you ever gotten drunk in public?
Yeah, and get is quite complicated. We've spoken about this before. So, Gabriel, if you want to go to the website and write get in the search box, you'll find probably a full episode on get, because there's a difference between the full verb get and when it's together with have for possession, because get can have different meanings. If you get a new car, that means you buy a new car. If you get drunk, that's the meaning of become. So you can get sick, to become sick. So get can have different meanings depending on the use. So we won't repeat what we've already said. So if you're specifically interested in the uses of get without have, go search for it on the website.
Craig, we got some more feedback. We have an email question from Manuel Tarrega Vallejo.
Yes, it's to you. So I'll read it for you, Reza. He says, "Hi, Reza. My name's Manuel, and I recently started to listen to your podcast. Thanks very much. It helps me a lot. Vocabulary, pronunciation, but especially, and here it should be especially, but we'll go to that in a second, phrasal verbs. Having said that, the first question arises, what's the difference between specially and especially with E? The second question, of which I couldn't find a suitable answer, it troubled my mind when I was doing a multiple choice close, and the question is, the room to gap, hueco, the room to looked out over the back garden. And Manuela said, I picked rent, R-E-N-T, however, the answer says it should be let. So, in other words, Manuel is asking the difference between rent and let. Thank you for your time. Looking forward to hearing your explanation. Let's look at specially and especially first. What do you think, mate?
Yes, I'm not surprised to get this question. It's a common mistake because it's very tricky. And it's made even worse.
What does tricky mean?
Tricky means problematic. And it's made even worse by the fact that Spanish speakers often mispronounce words that begin with S. Words such as sweet or Spain or special. It's not España, it's Spain. It's not especial, it's special. Mm-hmm. However, there is a word in English, especially, an adverb beginning with E. It's E-S. It begins, especially. So that compounds the problem. It makes it even worse.
But does it matter which one you use? Are they interchangeable or is there a difference?
In my opinion, they are entirely different. They're not interchangeable. I don't think a native speaker would make a mistake in this. To give a summary, I would say specially, that's beginning with letter S, specially means with special effort. For example, I baked this cake specially with the finest ingredients. I made a special effort. Specially.
We made this podcast specially with you in mind, Raphael.
Special effort. Especially, beginning with E, means in particular or particularly. For example, I love all meat, especially bacon.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So when I say especially, I'm talking about in particular bacon. You definitely can't say especially there. It's got to be especially. I'll give you a few more examples. Imagine someone said, I don't want to be treated specially. That means I don't want special treatment. I want normal treatment. Yeah, I don't want special effort.
So that's the adverb coming from the adjective special.
Right.
So special treatment is treated specially.
Exactly. And what about this sentence, Craig? If somebody said to you, I don't want to be treated especially.
Then I would expect a comma. So I don't want to be treated, comma, especially.
Yeah. If you don't write the comma, it doesn't sound
Doesn't
right.
make sense,
does it?
no.
If I say, I don't want to be treated especially,
Yeah.
it's like, treated especially? You can't be. I don't want to be treated. Pause. Especially. But that's an informal way of saying it. It would be much more typical in written English to say, I don't especially want to be treated. You would put the especially between don't and want. I don't especially want to be treated, which means I don't particularly want to be treated. Or I'm not very interested in being treated. I'm not very keen on being treated.
So if, for example, you were speaking about going out for the evening, imagine it's Friday night. If you said, well, I don't especially want to go out, that means I don't particularly want to go out. And you could say, I don't want to go out especially, and just add it to the end, yeah?
Yeah, after the comma.
After the comma.
Yeah. Or because we don't speak with commas, after a pause, you would pause before you said it.
So let's move on to Manuel's second question and query, but the difference between let and rent.
Craig, you said let's move on.
Let's move on.
Can you spell let's?
That's L-E-T''S. It's a contraction of let us. So let us move on will be let's move on. But this use of let, the verb to let and the verb to rent are easily confused because, well, they basically mean the same thing. But when you speak about the landlord, that's dueño, propietario, the landlord of your flat, for example, it's the landlord who lets a flat to the tenant. And the tenant is the person living in the flat, the person who pays the money. So the landlord receives the money, the tenant pays the money. So you'd say the landlord lets the flat, but the tenant rents the flat from the landlord. So if you think about it, it's kind of like the difference between lend and borrow. So the landlord's letting the flat and the tenant is renting the property from the landlord. And that was the confusion in Manuel's question, the gap-filled question.
Yeah. Well, I think his question was actually even harder than that. Just to go back to his question, he said, the room looked out over the back garden. Well, he's talking about the room. He's not specifying if it's the tenant or the landlord.
So it could be either, couldn't it?
No, it couldn't.
Why not?
Because of the dependent preposition. We would say a room for rent is the preposition for rent, but it's to let.
Yep.
It's a collocation.
You're absolutely right.
For rent equals to let.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really tricky question you got, Manuel.
I suspect that's at least CAE level. That's at least advanced level, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's another word that comes to mind when you speak about lent and rent, and that's the verb to hire, H-I-R-E, which means to pay to use something on a temporary basis. Very similar to rent, but again, the difference is collocation. So I think I would say I can hire a car and I can rent a car, but I would not hire a flat. That doesn't go together. That's not a collocation. So you rent a flat, you rent a house, you can rent a shop, but you hire or rent a car. And of course, hire also means to employ someone. So you can hire an accountant, you can hire a secretary, you can hire a teacher.
Moving on, we have a voice message from a long-standing alcoholic. That's Josep from Barcelona.
What does long-standing mean?
He's been one for a long time.
Not standing up for a long time?
No. And if he was an alcoholic, he'd fall over. But he's not an alcoholic. He's an alcoholic.
which means he's a fan of the show. Let's listen to Josep.
Hello, Craig and Reza, and rest of alcoholics. My name is Joseph. I'm from Barcelona. You know me already, maybe. And I was listening to your last episode about how to take your relationship to the next physical level. And I just wanted to comment about the book that I thought might be interesting. Sometimes people ask or request book recommendations in English, and I have one related to the subject of the last episode, related to transgenders, which is something that you guys didn't mention. But, okay, going to the subject. The book is called Paralien, not just a transgender, by Liam Klenk. This is a Swiss man born as a she, and I had the pleasure to meet him and work with him, actually, a long time ago. And he wrote this book. It's a paperback, 400 plus pages, obviously in English. And I thought if anyone interested in reading in English about that subject, Paralien could be a good advice. Let me give you the ISBN, which would be 978-178-589-1205. And is also available as an ebook in Matador Books, www.troubadour.co.uk. So, okay, off you go. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Josep, for your message. As always a pleasure to hear from you. And no, we didn't, did we, Reza? We didn't speak about transgender issues and gender identity.
Yes, we're sorry. That's something we missed. Well, partly because we were restricted by time, but perhaps we should have mentioned that.
Yeah, but thanks for your recommendation. Again, the book is called Paralien. There is a link in the show notes where you can find the book and buy the book. It's Not Just Transgender by Liam Klenk. And again, to see that link and find the book, go to inglespodcast.com/189.
Just one thing, Josep, you made a little mistake with the word advice. You said plus good advice. No, advice is uncountable, remember. So a good piece of advice.
Or a good recommendation, you could have said. And on the same subject, there's one TV series that I would like to recommend. I enjoyed very much on transgenderism. The series is called Transparent, and you can find it on Netflix if you use Netflix and you have that service, or Movie Star Plus. So on those two services, you can find the TV series Transparent, which I enjoyed watching. I think there are 2, maybe 3 series available at the moment.
Let's get down to the main meat. Yeah, of this.
The meat and potatoes of the episode.
Yeah. We can often talk about the meat of something, or the meaty part is kind of the main part, which is butchery. If you remember, Bibi from La Coruña asked us to talk about supermarket and butcher vocabulary because she's working in a supermarket. In fact, she says, I work as a butcher, but in the supermarket, charcutera. But it's the same name for both jobs, carnicera or carnicero and charcutera, isn't it? Oh, that's a good question.
I wasn't sure. So what do you think?
I would say no, to be honest. But then again, I'm ever so picky, aren't I? I'm really particular. But I would say no, to be honest.
What do you say? Pickies, nickies?
Picky.
No, but in Spanish.
Spanish. Tiquis-miquis.
Tiquis-miquis.
Yeah, I'm a bit tiquis-miquis.
Tiquis-miquis.
But you know, that it's our job to be picky, isn't it?
Fussy.
Charcutero or female charcutera, it could be translated as, I guess, pork butcher. Mm-hmm. That's what I found when I looked online. But you know what? Maybe this is a bit big-headed, but I trust myself more than what I found online.
I trust you more.
Now you're definitely crazy.
No, I do. I trust you more than the stuff I find on the internet these days.
In my case, Craig, it's just pure vanity. But you're crazy if you trust me more. And I racked my brains. That means I asked myself very hard. Well, think, Reza. You've been in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or some other big supermarket which has charcuteros. What do they say? And here's my explanation. Pork butcher, okay, maybe, but a pork butcher might sell things which are non-pork products.
That's true.
Even in Spain, they might sell cured beef, which you call cecina in Spanish. So beef isn't pork. And it's also typical to sell cheese.
That's dairy.
Yeah, it's not meat at all, but all of that gets sold at the charcuteria. So in English-speaking countries, the closest equivalent of charcuteria is cold meats counter.
And we had the word counter, mostrador, back in episode 185 when we answered the first part of Bibi's question about supermarket vocabulary. So that's inglespodcast.com/185. Cold meats counter. Yeah.
That's what you probably hear in a supermarket, Bibi. Although sometimes they have a delicatessen or deli counter. Although I know that isn't exactly the same because at a deli counter, you could get lots of things. You could get pate, you could get truffles, expensive luxury items. So it's probably better to say cold meats counter.
Also, deli sounds a bit more American English to me. Like
Right.
the deli counter I would expect in the US and maybe the cold meats counter in the UK.
So, Bibi, what to call you, the person? Well, then you are a cold meats counter assistant.
That's quite a mouthful.
It's quite a mouthful, but that's what they say. That's what they say. I thought very hard and I thought, yeah, I've heard that before because I was in a supermarket in Britain once and they said, where can I get some Spanish Serrano ham? They said, sir, go to the cold meats counter assistant and ask them if they have any. That's what I was told. Cold
Okay.
meats counter assistant.
Well, there you have it. That's now clarified. And if you are a vegetarian, if you do not eat meat, then we will be doing an episode in the future talking about veganism and vegetarianism. We are trying to get a special guest to come and join us. So I hope that will happen in the new year. But today we're going to be concentrating on meaty things. So lots of meat today.
Yes, so vegans, vegetarians, don't switch off. Please keep listening.
Keep
You'll
listening.
get your chance. You'll get your chance.
We like to be fair to all tastes if possible. Now, be careful of the pronunciation of butcher. B-U-T-C-H-E-R. The vowel sound, the first vowel sound in butcher is U. So that's the same sound as words like took, look, put, foot. Notice the sound doesn't always reflect the spelling. So double O with look, P-U-T, put, different letters, same sound. Butcher, butcher.
Is a butcher always a person, Craig?
A butcher is a profession, and it's also a verb because you can butcher something. So obviously a butcher butchers meat, but it can also be used, especially in the news, to speak about a particularly violent murder. You could say that the terrorists butchered 10 people in the shopping mall, for example. So to kill somebody violently can also be to butcher.
It also has a figurative, that means the words are not used in the strict sense, a figurative meaning, which is in Spain, hacer una chapuza. But I think in Mexico they say hacer un mugrero.
Yeah.
For example, hey, stop singing. You're butchering my favorite song. You're butchering it. That means you're singing it really badly. Hacer una chapuza. Butchering it.
And there's also a slang expression from where I come from in London to have a butcher's, which is rhyming slang for butcher's hook. Hook is engancho. That's where you hang the meat. A butcher hangs meat on a butcher's hook, and hook rhymes with look. It's a similar sound. So if you hear somebody say, hey, have a butcher's at this, what they are saying is, have a look at this.
Another useful word is slaughter. Difficult spelling. S-L-A-U-G-H-T-E-R. The GH are silent. Slaughter. So you can slaughter an animal for food. It means to kill it.
Let's look at some animals and the different cuts or types of meat you get from the animal, because as I'm sure you know, the name of the meat after the animal is butchered or killed is not the same as the word for the animal itself. For example, pig is the animal, but the meat from a pig is pork or maybe bacon. Which do you prefer, Reza, English bacon or American bacon?
I can't remember what American bacon's like. I was there in America when I was 15 years old. I don't really remember. Is there a big difference?
Yeah, it's typically thinner, narrower, and crispier. And British bacon tends to be wider and meatier. There's meat there.
Oh, well, I know, and I sorry, I say in advance, I know that I much prefer British bacon or Irish bacon, which is very good as well, by the way, to Spanish. I don't really like Spanish bacon. Is American bacon similar to Spanish?
Yeah, American bacon is closer to Spanish bacon. It's crispier. Although the middle bit of British bacon is very similar to the lomo that you can get in bocadillos. So you have like that bit of the pork that's quite meaty, and in Spain they can sell that separately, where in Britain it's part of the rasher of bacon. A rasher is the whole piece of the bacon.
I really like British bacon, actually. It's something I look forward to when I go back to the UK, eating British bacon.
Oh, bacon sandwich with real Irish butter. That's got to be one of my favourite foods.
Irish
bacon
butter,
sandwich.
And HP sauce?
No sauce.
You don't like sauce?
Just the pure drug, just the bacon inside the bread with melted butter dripping down my chin.
Another animal which I'm sure our listeners are familiar with is the cow. But do they know that the word for the meat is beef?
Carne de vaca.
Carne de vaca. Or res? Is it in South America, carne de res?
I'm not sure if it's South American, but I have heard that for cow meat or beef, as we say.
But there's another word for a special type of beef, which is veal. V-E-A-L. Now, that's what Spanish people call ternera.
And that's very common. I think ternera is much more common on Spanish menus here than veal is in the UK. I don't remember seeing veal very often. It's more common to see beef on menus than veal.
Yeah, but the Spanish, they like it young, so they like veal. Whereas in Britain, people prefer older beef.
The meat from sheep, there are two words you could use for sheep. So there's lamb, L-A-M-B. That's the younger sheep. And mutton, M-U-T-T-O-N, which is older, usually tougher meat. So meat can be tender, T-E-N-D-E-R, which is soft, or tough, T-O-U-G-H, which is hard, difficult to chew, masticar.
I'd be interested to know from our South American listeners if it's easy to get mutton, the older meat, in South America, because it isn't in Spain. Virtually nobody wants it. Everybody in Spain wants the young lamb.
Because unless you put it in stew, it's very tough, isn't it? It's very difficult to eat. Maybe if you put it estofada, if you stew it for a long time and you cook it for a long time, then it tends to become more tender.
Whereas the lamb might break into pieces, and you don't want that in a stew.
Chicken is another meat, although chicken is chicken. If it's dead or alive, a chicken is a chicken, right?
Yeah. Although we could specify which part of the chicken or other bird that we want. Some people like legs, some people prefer breast, or thighs, muslos, or wings, alas. What do you prefer, Craig?
I'm a leg man.
I'm a breast man.
Moving on to cuts of meat, because meat can be cut from different parts of the animal. One example is rib. You can have the rib of an animal. Ribs are lovely. Costillas.
Sirloin. S-I-R-L-O-I-N. That's another one. Sirloin. Is sirloin, is it solomillo? Or is that tenderloin? I get confused.
I'm not sure, but what I've done, I've put a link in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/189, so people can go and click on this link, and then you can see these different cuts on the actual animal. It's a cow. So you can see exactly where these come from. The sirloin, the tenderloin, there's shank and brisket. There are many. So the easiest thing to do visually is to give a diagram. If you're interested in what these cuts of meat are in English, then go to the show notes and click on the link.
A very common type of meat, which you won't find in the diagram because you'll see why in a minute, is minced beef. So you take a bit of beef, it could be brisket, could be shank, could be from anywhere, and you put it through a machine. So it comes out in little pieces, minced beef. Or in American English, they say ground beef.
And minced beef in one of my favourite British dishes, shepherd's pie.
Oh, me too.
Shepherd's pie is made with lamb, and there's a similar one made with beef called cottage pie. So remember, shepherd's pastor, shepherd's pie is with lamb, and cottage pie is made with minced beef or ground beef.
Craig, do you like sausages, salchichas?
I like sausages when they have good meat inside, usually when they're homemade and not mass-produced. I think the mass-produced sausages don't have very much taste, and I always think, what's inside them? What do they put in these sausages? It must be like the really bad parts of the animal. But I think if you buy from a local butcher and people who have sometimes their own farm, if they're locally sourced, then yeah, I like sausages.
Do you like the gristle?
Not really. What's gristle?
Oh, what's gristle? Good question. Gristle
Isn't it what's between the bones?
Yeah, it's the weird bits which are not quite bone and not quite meat.
And it's difficult to chew. Chew was masticar, if you remember.
You kind of find little pieces of gristle in the sausage.
No.
And some people don't mind it, but other people like me really don't like the gristle at all.
I don't like it very much. Be careful of the pronunciation of sausage. So the first vowel sound is o, like sock, so, and sige, sausage, because the spelling is different to the pronunciation. It's sausage.
A type of cold meat which is very popular is salami. It's the same in English because it's the same in Spanish and Italian, and I bet lots of other languages. Do you like salami?
Yep, I do like salami very much. And another word that is used in English, although it's a Spanish word, is chorizo. So maybe you hear the pronunciation from British people, chorizo, but they use the same word. Or maybe Spanish sausage is another way to say chorizo.
And it's become very popular in the UK in recent years, hasn't it?
It has. You can buy it in supermarkets, at cold meat counters everywhere.
Yeah. I'm afraid we don't have enough time to go into a big debate today, but if you want to read about the debate, go onto the internet and Google Jamie Oliver chorizo paella. A few years ago, Jamie Oliver, a very famous British chef, said that he sometimes puts chorizo in paella. And many Valencians nearly had a heart attack at the idea of putting chorizo in paella, but he does.
Yeah.
Let's not open that debate again. We don't want to anger our Valencian listeners. Craig, a thing that I like, but a lot of people really hate, is black pudding or blood sausage, morcilla.
No, I don't like that.
You don't like it at all?
No.
The Spanish sometimes think that it's unique to them in Europe. It isn't. It's a typical traditional English thing as well. In the north of England, they also make black pudding.
And Scotland too.
Yeah.
Obviously, people know about hamburgers or burgers, but I didn't. I thought it was invented in the US because you think of McDonald's and other famous Burger King and hamburger restaurants in the US.
The clue's in the name.
Yeah.
Hamburger is from Hamburg. That's why it's called a hamburger.
So the hamburger was invented in Hamburg, Germany.
Yep. It's got nothing to do with ham. It's hamburger, which gets reduced to burger these days.
And that explains why there's no ham in it.
Yep.
Meatballs, albondigas.
Do you like meatballs?
Sometimes. It depends. I don't like meatballs with tomato sauce. But if they're meatballs with something else, then yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you?
I do. I do like meatballs. Homemade ones. Good ones. What about ham? Craig, in Spanish they say jamón York. How do we say that in English?
Processed ham is probably the best term. Processed ham. Be careful of the pronunciation of ham. Some Spanish learners pronounce it as jam, which of course is mermelada. So the ham, imagine you're cleaning your glasses. Ham. So you've got processed ham and cured ham. C-U-R-E-D. Cured ham is jamón serrano, Spanish ham.
In Britain, if you just ask for ham, you'll get the processed version.
Yeah.
That's what people usually receive unless they specify specifically cured ham.
And if you want good serrano ham in the UK, take it with you from Spain.
Much cheaper.
It's much cheaper and easier to get, because it's not easy to get good ham, I think, in good cured ham in the UK.
I tell you what, Craig, shall we test our listeners a bit? Shall we say a word in Spanish and see if they know the English?
Go for it. Let's do it.
And then you can put them out of their misery?
Okay, you say the Spanish, I'll say the English.
Chuletas.
Chops.
Hígado.
Liver.
Riñón.
Kidney.
Tripa.
Tripe.
Vísceras o casquería.
Ooh, that's difficult. Offal. O-F-F-A-L. Offal.
Manteca.
Lard. L-A-R-D. Lard.
How did you do? Did you get them all right, listeners at home? Did you know those words? Probably not awful, I imagine.
Yeah, not my favourite cut of meat.
Me neither, but I do like haggis, which is a classic Scottish dish, and they put offal, they put all sorts of things in there. Liver, kidney, blood, onions.
Lots of spices as well.
You name it. Craig, if I went to a butcher's and asked for halal meat, what am I looking for?
You'd probably be looking for meat that's specially prepared for the Muslim religion. So that's according to strict Islamic dietary laws. And halal, if you see halal butcher in a butcher's shop, then that's you'd expect meat prepared for Islamic tradition.
Can you think of any other special requirements for some people?
Well, the Jewish religion also has special meat requirements. So the name for that is kosher. If meat is kosher, it's been killed, the animal's been killed and prepared in a specific way according to the Jewish religion. So those two words are useful to remember if you see them outside a butcher's shop: halal and kosher. Halal Islamic and kosher Jewish.
And of course, as probably most of the listeners know, neither Muslims nor Jews eat pork if they're strict practicing Jews or Muslims. They do not eat pork.
That's right. So Reza, can you think of any idioms that we could talk about connected to meat and butchery?
Yes, there are a few. For example, you can say that one man's meat is another man's poison. So it's a saying or an idiom, which means that if one person may like one thing, but another doesn't like that thing at all. For example, you might love wine, but if I drink it, it makes me feel violently ill. One man's meat is another man's poison. You love it, but I hate it.
And we mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. If you speak about the meat and potatoes of something, you mean the basic fundamental thing. For example, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of the issue. Let's speak about the really important stuff.
But Craig, do you know that all that meat and no potatoes just ain't right? Like green tomatoes. Do you know that song? No. Oh, it's a Louis Armstrong classic. All that meat and no potatoes just ain't right. Like green tomatoes. Moving on.
Moving quickly on. Mutton dressed as lamb or mutton dressed up as lamb. What does that mean?
Oh, careful if you say that. That's when an older person is dressing in younger clothes to try and look younger.
So it's not a negative remark, is it? It's not a negative comment. It's quite derogatory.
Yes, it's derogatory. It's more than negative. It's an insult, really. You wouldn't ever say that to someone's face. You could only say it behind the back.
So they're quite old, but they're dressing and trying to appear younger.
Yes. So it is not a compliment. No es un piropo. Not at all. What about dead meat, Craig? What does that mean?
If someone says that you're dead meat, that means you've done something really bad and you're going to be punished for it. Yeah. So, for example, if two brothers are arguing and one smashes the other one's phone, says, right, you're dead meat, I'm going to get you for that. That means you're going to die. It doesn't mean literally you're going to die, but it means I'm going to punish you. I'm going to hit you for doing that.
And Craig, tell me, have you ever been to a meat market?
Well, I know what one is. It's some place where you can buy meat like steak and lamb, and isn't it?
It could be, but there's another meaning.
What's the other meaning, Reza?
The interesting meaning, a meat market is colloquial English for a bar or a club or some similar place where people often go on the pool. Para ligar. On the pool.
So what's the difference between a meat market or a singles bar? Because in a singles bar, there are people waiting or wanting to meet each other. They go there to meet a partner.
Same thing, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say. Meat market, I'd say, is a bit more old-fashioned. Yeah, singles bar is a more modern term, isn't it? Because the idea of a meat market, like the people there are meat available to eat, it sounds quite crude, you know, whereas singles bar sounds respectable.
So it's another derogatory term for a place where people go to meet each other, maybe just for sex.
Yeah. To meet each other, that's MEET, by the way.
Nice to meet you.
Craig, anything else to say about meat?
Well, I've got a joke.
Let's hear it.
I was at the butcher's yesterday and I said to the butcher, can I have 2 pieces of the meat on the top shelf? And the butcher says, no, I'm sorry. The stakes are too high.
Very good.
So
Very good.
Let me explain that. It's a play on words, un juego de palabras, because steak, S-T-E-A-K, of course it's carne, filete, and steak, same pronunciation, S-T-A-K-E, is where, for example, you put something at risk. It's like a gambling idiom. You could lose money. The money you put on a bet is your stake in a poker game, for example. So when the butcher said the stakes are too high, it could mean the meat is too high on the shelf, or it could mean it's too risky, demasiado peligroso, to go up and get the steaks. It's not so funny when you have to explain it.
You've reminded me of an even worse joke, I'm afraid to say. Also in a butcher shop. A man goes into a butcher shop and he says to the butchers, do you have a sheep's head? And the butcher says, no, it's just the way I comb my hair.
Oh, that's terrible. That is terrible. And now it's your turn to practice your English, but please don't send Reza any jokes. What's your favourite meat and how do you like it cooked? Practice the vocabulary and send us a voice message. Are you a meat and potatoes kind of person? Or do you prefer vegetarian food? Send us a message on SpeakPipe. You can do that by going to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. There's also a link on the homepage of the website at inglespodcast.com. Or you can send us an email with a comment or question to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com.
Or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you would like more detailed show notes, as usual, go to patreon.com/Ingles podcast and join up and become one of our family of sponsors. Huge thanks to Bruno, our gold sponsor on Patreon, who's sponsoring us through his company Walking Tours of Copenhagen. That's at copenhagenwalkingtour.com. If you're going to Copenhagen soon, why not get in touch with Bruno and he will offer you a 10% discount off of the walking tours of Copenhagen, which are in English or Spanish, when you tell him that you are an AIRC189 and a fan of the show. He also has castle tours of Hamlet's Castle or Frederiksborg Castle. And you can go and see the Tivoli Gardens, the oldest shopping street in the world in Copenhagen. And he also has walking tours of the favela in Rio de Janeiro. Links to those two websites are in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/189. And Reza, let's thank our other lovely sponsors this week.
Thanks to Beatriz, Pedro, Maite, Lara, Rafa Banthels, Nestor Garcia Mañez, that's Nestor GM, at Luces Extrañas, Maria, Lorena, Sara Jarabo, Carlos Garrido, Mamen, Juan Leva, Corey Finnerin at ivenvy.com, Miren, José Luis, Agus, Mariel, Manuel García Betagon, Jorge Jiménez, Raúl López, Rafael, Manuel Tarazona, José Manuel, Juan Carlos, Pilar Martinez, Gambate Blog, and our most recent Patreons, Ana Giovanna and Igor Garmendia.
And thanks again to Bruno, our gold sponsor from CopenhagenWalkingTour.com. Thanks to Patricia Alonso, who's been working hard to transcribe the free transcriptions for you. And you can find those on the website, episodes 131 to 142 and episodes 1 to 11.
And if you want more than that, you could join our Patreon program for as little as $1 per month, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions that have been lovingly transcribed by Angelica Bello from Madrid. Just go to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Inglespodcast.
On next week's episode, we are at the chemist's, at the pharmacy, at the drugstore. What's the difference between those three words? And what could you ask for if you're having health problems while you're on holiday? Join us next week. Until then, it's goodbye from Reza.
And goodbye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.